Hi, Katie, and welcome to our Sporting Global podcast. It's a pleasure having you here.
Oh, thank you, Ole. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm looking forward to our chat. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, and I mean, like, your house life in the UK these days. I guess it's kind of crazy.
We're in London lockdown. I managed to get out on Sunday, and I actually took a short video of me advertising the Web Summit by the Suffragette Memorial in London. So
nice.
It was great. Check it out online, but it was great to get out and about for a bit. Although obviously I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, within the parameters, within the regulations, of course. And I mean, like, you have to just take the opportunity when you can, just getting that fresh air, getting out, and I mean, like, promoting a great opportunity. And for those of you that are tuning in today, we're gonna talk a lot about some interesting things here with Katie, about SIGA, about sports integrity and equality, and there's a lot of stuff that you've been part of, Katie. And if you want to hear more stuff like this, make sure to like the video, maybe subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it too, and check out what SIGA is doing, because they're doing a lot of cool things. But Katie, I mean, like, we're just going to dive right into it. And I'm kind of like curious, how did your journey in the sport industry begin?
I think, like everyone, Ole, in sport, it begins with one word, and that's passion.
Right.
I think sport has really been a huge anchor in my life.
Yeah.
It's kept me on the straight and narrow. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough to be an athlete. But privately, whether it's running or playing team sports, it's kept me going in my darkest hours, and
Right.
certainly in lockdown, keeping up the exercise and physical activity. And that passion really, whether it's to watch sport or participate in sport, really does keep you going. And obviously, I've had the enriching experience to be able to combine my passion with my career. And when I first started out as thinking that I wanted to do law, I didn't realize there was such a thing as sports law.
Right.
And it was only when I did a thesis on sports media and entertainment law at law school, I thought, wow, that is amazing. It's definitely a lot interesting than probate law from my perspective.
Right. I think everyone just like, are tired of the regular law, and just like, okay, when you put the sports element into it, it's just something unique, something special.
Exactly right, Ole. And it's there's so many different areas of law that sports combined. It's contract, it's litigation, it's commercial, it's sponsorship, it's employment law, and in some cases criminal proceedings. We'll get onto that later on. But that's really, did drive me, combination of the professional side with law and also the passion of what I'm interested in. And any of your viewers out there who are interested in pursuing a career in sports, don't do it, but do it with passion and do it with drive, and you will succeed.
Absolutely. I mean, like, we could almost wrap it up and just say all you need to succeed in sports is passion. Like that's what it comes down to. we're down here. No. But I mean, like, it's really fascinating, Katie, and I think you touch upon really something important of, like, you just find that passion around sports, and also, like, maybe realizing, right, how much key elements are important in sports in order to make it work, like you mentioned, sort of like your law background, and just I think that's sort of like an interesting thesis as well that you brought up. I mean, like, that must be a fun concept to dig deeper into. How was that experience?
Oh, it was fascinating. I did some cases. Probably the most memorable on the entertainment side was a famous case I studied about Naomi Campbell and throwing a mobile phone at an assistant. So those sorts of things, injunctions, privacy, and those sort of subject areas are really interesting, and one we can all relate to. It's not like creating a debenture for banking law, which was one of my first jobs to do, where really it didn't leap off the page at me. When you see sport and it's played and in the entertainment world, it becomes real. And that's what really drives me, putting those two together.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. And obviously, you also sort of like built up, I guess, or like sort of like had a huge passion for sports integrity and equality, which obviously led you to be part of the SEGA team. And tell us a little about this passion, and I guess like sort of like the purpose behind SEGA, because I think it's important for people, that maybe don't know about SEGA yet to like, okay, what is SEGA all about?
Yeah, I'd love to explain about what SEGA is about. And I would say that when the CEO and myself go and speak to a new SEGA member or a new partner like Sporting Global, or even a new employee,
Right.
we don't say that it's a job. SEGA is a mission, and
Yep.
its mission is clean sport free from corruption.
Right.
And all of the work that we do is underpinned by a set of universal standards on sport integrity.
Yep.
And those standards touch on 4 areas: good governance, financial integrity, sports betting integrity,
Yep.
and youth development and child protection. And what we're doing, we're not a think tank, we're an action tank, and we're change makers. And sport, and I think it's quite surprising that sport is probably the last industry to have any independent oversight.
Right.
So we've created our standards, and I'm working with several sports organisations to implement those standards. And then we have appointed the British Standards Institute to review and assess the standards in accordance with our principles. And we will rate the standards and rate sports organisations' compliance with them on an annual basis. And that drive is to bring about cultural change. So, for example, on the subject of gender equality, how diverse is your board? Do you have gender equality? Because the sponsors, that issue is important to many sponsors. They want to align with brands that do, and sports organizations that have that in place. And so that's why we're bringing about cultural change in order to do that. So SEGA, in a nutshell, we're a non-for-profit association. We're global. We're registered currently under Geneva, under Swiss law, but we pursue a global mission, and we've created SEGA America, recently SEGA Europe, with plans to expand in Latin America too.
Awesome. I mean, like it's a really great initiative, and as you talk about too, like why isn't it anything, I guess, like this in sports, right? Sort of like, I guess, like, it's been also, we always talk a little bit about like, how is the sport industry, being professionalized, and how fast it's been going, especially in the last decade, and like even just looking at the last 10 years of like how fast the industry's been moving forward. A lot of things, the typical ways of how the industry's been doing things, and having these sort of regulations, these kind of tools and access, it's what's going to drive the industry forward. And I think, like, with our focus of helping the young generation, I guess the students and sport professionals there that are trying to find their path, it's like, how do you understand, the new trends of the industry? And I think, like, what you guys at SEGA are doing is sort of like part of that new trend, of like, how do we keep, the structural insights in order to, make sure that both organizations, the sponsors and so forth are following the necessary standards to keep the industry moving forward in several different ways.
No, that's absolutely correct. And, driving change, it's challenging, but ultimately, especially after COVID, every penny that a sports organization spends is going to be accountable. So, if they can show that to, by complying with the financial integrity standards, and show that to the sponsors, the fans, the consumers, that they're a gold standard, then that will only drive greater business for them ultimately.
Right. No, 100%. And you mentioned some of like the initiatives that obviously that SEGA have been doing already with some of the events, and there's another one coming up soon. But obviously you've been creating the SEGA Youth Forum, which we obviously were part of. Really appreciate that, and it was a great panel. I think it was a huge success. I hope you guys thought it was great as well. And of course now the upcoming SEGA Web Summit on female leadership. So for those that sort of like are thinking, okay, this is an interesting topic, this is something that I maybe want to learn about or like want to be part of, then can you give us sort of like a sneak peek of what people can expect to see and learn during that summit?
Oh, I'd love to. I think first I'd like to address the Youth Forum, and it was absolutely fantastic. Your panel especially, which is, to inspire young people to to have a career in sports. And
Right.
also you're a prime example, Ole, of a young person who hasn't waited for a career to happen. You've knocked down the doors, smashed those ceilings, and made it happen. And that entrepreneurship, you know, I really do commend. And that's what I learned from having the Youth Forum. We had huge impact. We touched 51 countries, that Youth Forum, and it's all about driving a global change and creating a global movement. And that Youth Forum was just the kickoff. We appointed the Youth Council towards the end of last year. And it's important for us to not only teach integrity, but also listen to the young people. And I was really impressed with that sport integrity is a key driver for them. And because ultimately they are the future leaders. And we need to not only influence change at the top, but we need to influence change with the future leaders, and there'll be a meeting together. So that's what's really important for us. But as regards to the Web Summit on Female Leadership in Sport, obviously it's a huge passion and exciting drive and initiative that SEGA's moving forward. It's not just, all of our events are not just thought leadership events in themselves. They are trigger points to create global action. So I've been, back in 2018, we created the SEGA Women Global Mentorship Program, and I coordinate and lead that initiative. I have to say, in lockdown, Ollie, it's absolutely exploded. I've got 50 mentors from around the world, whether it's from FIFA, MasterCard, MLB, just to name a sample, right through to the 50 global mentees. So we're all over the world, and the program it's a yearly cycle. It's open to women 24 years or over. And it's really fantastic to see the dynamics triggered. We have 4 digital workshops throughout the course of the year in groups, and then we're paired with our mentees and have bilateral workshops. So the SEGA Web Summit is the pinnacle of the SEGA Women movement. And we've got 12 live webinars. We've got keynote speeches. I just got confirmed, so sneak peek, that the Director General of the United Nations office in Geneva, she's confirmed, as well as the chair of the B20. So it's everything from serious issues, which is, you know, gender parity in the boardroom, right through to having some sport fashion and how sport fashion is changing cultures. So it's a real mix of topics, all underpinned by sport integrity. And I encourage everyone to register and be part of it. We need you.
Absolutely. I mean, like, it is an amazing initiative. I mean, like, we're happy to support it. And I think it's like, I think you touched upon something really important, like, sort of like, you know, of course, how do we educate or like help stimulate this sort of like movement or I guess, you know, actions at the top level. But as sort of like our focus too is like, how do we help the upcoming leaders, you know, like those that are going to take this over. And it's fascinating, I think, to see like, you know, what kind of like are important for those young people. Like, they already so like conscious about like their decisions, like their habits, you know, these kind of like, okay, what is important for me? And I think it's just like proves like the point of like where we're going now. And like with the initiatives like SEGA with the different kind of forums and summits, it's a way of like helping, you know, these young professionals as well, and those future leaders, like, be aware and understanding also the challenges that are in the midst of this, and how can they, you know, get involved. So I highly encourage all of you that are listening and tuning in to, you know, check that out. We'll have the link in bio and all this stuff, and don't miss out. You know, it's a great opportunity, and I'm sure you will learn a lot. But we have to go a little bit back into the youth forum, because I'm kind of like curious, you know, of course, like you said, okay, it was a great panel, like it was a great forum, a lot of great speakers, a lot of young people like having their voices heard and speaking, you know, about their experiences. But what were some of the key lessons you learned from the event from your side, and why is it important to educate, you know, the youth on sport integrity?
I think the key lessons I learned was that young people, and you hit on it just in your intro there, was that they are more conscious. Certainly, you know, they're holding brands and sports accountable.
Yeah.
And I saw the real enthusiasm that they want, that they're not often given the opportunity to speak. It's
Yeah.
always a hierarchy, and we need to break that down.
Yeah.
We cannot, just because we're older, hold on to that power. And I really believe in empowering the youth.
Yeah.
Certainly I'm learning from them all the time, especially, and I'm going to give a big shout out to Andalea, who's doing our Instagram feed, who's on our youth council. Couldn't do it without you. No idea. I'm running the Twitter, she's running the Insta. So those are sorts of really good lessons to learn. I think the social media part, they know how to influence more, and we need that sort of that innovation. And I think young people do bring innovation. And I encourage, we're giving the Youth Council a voice on our structures, and we're trying to lead by example. And I know the FA have a Youth Council as well, and I encourage all sports organisations to bring on the young people in a meaningful way to create the changes they need to.
Yeah, and as you talk about too, like having that balance, I guess, between like those mentors, the mentees, and the young people, and having like someone you can learn from, look after, and get inspired by. So it's always like, of course, giving those young people a voice, and at the same time, like, learning from the ones that have been there, for a time. But at the end of the day, as you talk about, it's like, how do we actually, provide valuable insights, actions, and taking a stand, doing actually something about it, because that's what it comes down to. There's a lot of people, talking and providing a lot of, knowledge, but actually putting down actions. I think that's what's going to be like a key differentiator, and showcasing, okay, we're not only talking about the movement, but we're being there, we're taking the steps necessary in order to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Make it happen is my mantra, actually. So it's not enough just to have it in words, but it's making it a reality. And that's what the SEGA Women Global Mentorship Program is about.
Yeah.
It's about women doing something for other women.
Yeah.
We've got to start with ourselves, and we've got to help each other. Every experience, any sort of discrimination I've experienced, I'm sure those are the similar cases all around the world. Why don't I and my fellow mentors share those and how we dealt with it with the young women, so that when they come to experience that, it's easier for them? Why not make it easier? And that's what I believe we all have a responsibility with our careers, whether we're a man or a woman, which is to help the next generation and leave that legacy so that they're better than us.
Yeah, no, 100%. Make it happen. I mean, like that's what it comes down to. And just to clarify, we did not discuss that before the podcast began. I just hit that right on the head. So that's just lucky.
Yeah. I'm sending you telepathic waves.
Yeah, I mean, like we just like, I have that ability, I guess. But let's move on. I mean, like we're about to wrap up sort of here, like with the podcast as well. And I'm kind of like curious of like, you've been obviously working with SEGA a few years now, and like, being into the sports law ecosystem, like focusing on, law, integrity, equality, and what are some of the changes that you've seen the last few years, and what steps should the industry focus on moving forward? I guess we have talked a little bit about it already, but sort of like, how have you seen like your sort of like, how do you see things changing?
I think it's a really interesting question, Ole. And I have to cast my mind back to when, just before we set up SEGA, which is back in 2015, our CEO now, Emmanuel, and I were working with each other in a different capacity. And that capacity did really trigger the birth of SEGA. And what Emmanuel set me up to do, no small feat, was he asked me to lead a project with Harvard Kennedy School on how transparent was the men's professional football industry. So I went with Professor Matt Andrews, and we opened up the door to, many football, FIFA, UEFA were involved, as well as all of the lots of samples of soccer clubs from around the world. And what it came down to, and obviously our CEO, Emmanuel, did know what the answer was. He didn't know the exact percentage, but he knew that from a transparency point of view, it was pretty dark. There's actually 90% of soccer football was a dark space back in 2015.
Wow.
And we had an event which was actually at the WIPO in Geneva, which is the World Intellectual Property Office.
Yeah.
And we called it the FITS Forum, the Financial Integrity and Transparency in Sport.
Yeah.
And that really was the genesis of SEGA, without even knowing what SEGA was, because we gathered all sides of the industry, which are the stakeholders that make up our coalition. We gathered sport, we gathered sponsors, we gathered international organizations, we gathered governments, all around this to discuss what was the issue. And let's not beat around the bush. At the backdrop in 2015, you know, the head of FIFA had just been decapitated, metaphorically speaking. And a whole load of sports officials were indicted by the Swiss authorities. So sorry, by the US authorities. So and then Switzerland. So that was the state of it in 2015. And all of the work we're doing at SEGA is to eradicate corruption through these universal standards. And I really think that we can affect change really effectively through our rating system, which will then hold sports organizations accountable. But what I've seen in the last few years is that sports organizations are not being reactive, they're being proactive. This is not an effort to you know, name and shame. It's an opportunity to for sports organizations to say, look, we need some governance. Can you help us? And we'll work with them to ensure that they are compliant and give them a transitionary period. And then we will publish the rating. And that's during the pilot phase. And I'm working with several European federations, as well as international federations and national Olympic committees during that pilot phase. And when we announce those results, I believe other sports organizations will see the benefit and want to get their house in order too. And it's an evolutionary process. Other changes I've seen is obviously the BLM movement last year, huge trigger, not just for race, but other issues as well. And I think that these social movements are now changing. We're not waiting for governments. We're not waiting for lawmakers. We are empowering ourselves to make the change. And that's what SEGA is, empowering the sports organizations to come along a journey with us.
And I guess, like, in a sense too, it was sort of like, you know, how can I say, the timing, right, for it as well. Like, looking back into everything that happened, I remember I was sitting in the US as well, like during my program at USF, and everything like this happened, you know, and I was like, wow. I mean, like, everybody knew like something sketchy was up, you know. It wasn't like a
it wasn't a
secret,
surprise.
you know. It wasn't a surprise, as you said, but I mean, like, I think for anything to happen, there has to be, you know, whether that's a startup or an initiative or a movement, it's sort of like the timing of things, you know, like something has to like trigger that effect to really shoot it off. And I think, you know, of course, the effort and the research and all the elements that you guys were doing, plus the situation, you know, in that was happening in Switzerland and in the US, like that just sort of like elevated the importance of, okay, we have to look at this differently. And I think everyone was just like, you can't go around the bush anymore. Like, you actually have to do things by the book. And I think that also leads to like, okay, how do we solve those kind of challenges and issues that are there and will still be there in some time for sure. But there's a way of, like, you know, timing, right? I think always like timing is the way to go around it. We talk a lot about that with Sporting Global too, of like, okay, the time is now, you know, for a different way and a new way of like changing how the recruitment is done, you know, because it's been done in a very old fashioned way for such a long time, and there has to be a change. And with that, you know, you just complement, like, you know, what you guys see you guys doing, like the importance of values, and you see like sort of like the new generation, they just don't, they start looking at the big picture here, like what is the tiny details that I have to look at, and how do I fit into this landscape. It's no longer about everyone wants to work for Barcelona or Real Madrid. I guess, like, you know, a lot of people still want to do that, but it's also like, okay, but why do I want to work for Real Madrid? Why do I want to work for, you know, Barcelona? Like, what's in there that makes sense for me to be part of? Not longer just, oh, Barcelona or or whatever brand or big organization that might be. And I think that's really important. And together, with your initiative and hopefully ours too, is a way of like, finding and understanding these kind of elements in a much better way for the future leaders, so they can make an impact as well, and taking actions.
I totally agree. Making it happen now is the time. We feel like I feel like we share the same mantras all the time.
I mean, like
But
that's why we have this partnership. It all makes sense.
exactly. But in innovation, cultural change, and also I think that values are the new oil of the world. And I think when we recover with integrity after this pandemic, the values, I think we've all learned and celebrated different areas of our life that the pandemic has taught us, whether or not we were ready for it,
right.
or wanted it. But I think that those values moving forward are absolutely key. And it's a pleasure to have our partnership and share the same values, because that's we haven't even met in person yet, Ollie, have we?
No, we haven't.
But we share that, and even in COVID, we've managed to drive some good partnerships and initiatives forward, which I'm loving.
Absolutely, me too. It's been an absolutely pleasure. It's been a pleasure having you part of this podcast, and I mean, like, we're just gonna wrap up with a final question, and for us, we always try to help out, the students, young professionals, the future leaders of the industry that are sitting here, and just like, I think now they're just sitting like, wow, there's a lot of fascinating things happening in the industry, and I want to see, and I think it also sheds like in this, I guess, how hard the pandemic, the COVID has been. It's sort of like nice having something that you see that things are happening, movements are happening, actions are happening, things are providing results. And for the upcoming leaders, this is the time to be part of it. It's a great time to be part of sports, because there's so much things happening. But from your side of things, like, what kind of tips do you have for these sort of students, sport professionals that are trying to get their foot in the door? Like, what tips do you have for them?
Don't be passive, be proactive, believe in yourself, and dream big. Live as you dream big.
100%. I mean, like, I don't even want to say anything to that. It's all
Those
good.
are my
I mean,
three
like,
tips.
it all makes sense. It all makes sense. I think you're putting right on it, especially, in terms of being proactive. We talk about it almost like every week on things we go around. It's like, at the end of the day, no one is waiting for you. Like, you have to take the initiative. And I mean, like, Katie, as you, like, with SIGA, with other, the old initiatives you've been involved with, it's taking that initiative, being proactive. Like, a lot of people can talk about it, but unless you do anything about it, nothing happens. That's the reality. And that, I think, it's the key lesson for you guys that are sitting home and, maybe trying to find your path too. It's like, take the step. You got to take the responsibility for your actions and show your interest. Maybe one of that initiative for you is being part of the the female leadership summit. Maybe it's creating a profile at Sporting Global. Maybe it's reaching out to somebody. Like, those tiny little steps is towards your path of reaching that goal you have in the industry, and that's what matters. But you got to start somewhere. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, start today, register for the Web Summit, and we're doing it through an awesome app. And once you've registered, it's free to register. You just click on the option Stand with SEGA, which is in support of 5 sport integrity goals, which no one can argue with. And so get your free ticket, and the app gives you the opportunity to network with other like-minded men and women. This is not an event just for women. Men, we need you. We can't do it without you. So, Ollie, you better be there.
I'll be there, no doubt.
Great. Thank you.
So with that, Katie, I will thank you so much for your time, for having a great conversation once again. I mean, like, I can't wait to the day we're sitting in London, or maybe you want to come over to Norway. Who knows? Maybe
get
both.
Me out of here. Get me out of captivity.
Yeah, that's why I said Norway. And like, it's less people. we can just be in the nature. It's all good. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having you here. And thank you so much for taking the time. And with every video, everything we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian. So now you know some Norwegian.
Cool. See you later.
All right. Thank you, Katie.
Bye.